She ain't eaten in 2 days, Mr. whispered the girl, holding a baby. The cowboy looked at his campfire. A 4-chapter Texas story, -1878. Introduction. Welcome back to our channel. Today we're bringing you an incredible story from the heart of Texas in 1878, where survival meant everything, and kindness could change a life forever. If you enjoy stories of the American frontier that touch your heart, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next in this incredible tale of humanity in the harshest of times. Chapter 1. The stranger in the shadows. The Texas sun had set hours ago, leaving behind a canvas of stars scattered across the endless sky like diamonds on black velvet. Sam Carter adjusted his worn leather hat and stirred the dying embers of his campfire with a mesquite branch. The flames danced higher, casting flickering shadows across his weathered face and the small clearing where he'd made camp. For the night. At 42, Sam had seen more of life than most men twice his age. The scar running from his left temple to his jaw told stories he preferred not to share, earned during his time as a Union cavalry officer before he'd traded his blue uniform for chaps and spurs. Now, 5 years after the war's end, he made his living driving cattle across the vast expanse of Texas, from ranch to railroad, carrying the dreams and fortunes of other men. His horse, a sturdy bay mare named Belle, snorted softly and raised her head, ears pricked forward into the darkness. Beyond the firelight, Sam's hand instinctively moved to the Colt .45 on his hip. In this part of Texas, 20 miles south of Fort Worth, visitors after dark usually meant trouble. "Easy, girl," he whispered to Belle, his eyes scanning the mesquite brush and prickly pear cacti that surrounded his small camp. The night was unusually quiet. Even the coyotes had fallen silent. Then he heard it, the soft shuffle of feet on the hard-packed earth. Hesitant and careful, someone was approaching his camp, trying to stay quiet but failing. Sam remained seated by the fire, his posture relaxed but ready, his hand resting casually near his weapon. "I can hear you out there," he called into the darkness, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Best you come into the light where I can see you proper." The shuffling stopped. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire and Belle's occasional snort. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a young woman, maybe 19 or 20, holding something close to her chest. Her dress, once perhaps a cheerful blue calico, was now faded and torn, covered in dust and stains that spoke of hard travel and harder times. But it was her face that made Sam's hand move away from his gun. Thin and gaunt, with hollow cheeks, and eyes that held the desperate look of someone who had seen too much, too young. Her dark hair hung in limp strands around her shoulders, and her bare feet were cut and bloody. "Please, mister," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, cracked from thirst and exhaustion. "I don't mean no harm. I just... I saw your fire." Sam studied her carefully. In his years on the frontier, he'd learned to read people quickly. It often meant the difference between living to see another sunrise and feeding the buzzards. This girl wasn't dangerous, at least not in the way that mattered. She was scared, desperate, and carrying something that made her arms shake with more than just fatigue. "What you got there?" he asked gently, nodding toward the bundle in her arms. The girl's grip tightened protectively, and that's when Sam heard it, a weak, mewling cry, barely audible over the fire's crackling. "A baby. She ain't eaten in 2 days, mister," the girl whispered, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. "I ain't got no milk left, and she's so weak. I thought, I thought maybe, She swayed on her feet, and Sam was up in an instant, catching her elbow as she nearly collapsed. Up close, he could see she was even worse off than he'd first thought. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin pale beneath the grime, and her eyes held the glassy look of someone who hadn't slept in days. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, guiding her to sit on his bedroll by the fire. 3, maybe. "For days," she admitted, cradling the baby closer. "We've been walking since we left San Antonio. Had to leave real quick like." Sam didn't ask why in Texas in 1878. There were plenty of reasons a young woman might need to leave a town quickly, and most of them involved men who couldn't take no for an answer. Instead, he moved to his saddlebags and pulled out a small pot and some dried beef. "What's your name?" he asked, as he began preparing a simple stew. "Mary," she said quietly. "Mary Elizabeth Hawkins. And here's my daughter, Grace." She pulled back a corner of the threadbare blanket, revealing a tiny face, pale and thin, with closed eyes and lips that barely moved with shallow breathing. "How old is she?" 3 months, Mary whispered. "Born in December, right before Christmas." "Daddy." She stopped, her jaw tightening. Her daddy ain't in the picture no more. Sam nodded, understanding. He'd seen too many women left to fend for themselves after men had taken what they wanted and moved on. It was one of the things about the frontier that made his stomach turn, the way some men treated women like possessions to be used and discarded. As the stew began to bubble over the fire, filling the air with the rich scent of beef and wild onions he'd gathered earlier, Sam watched Mary rock the baby gently. Despite her obvious exhaustion, There was something fierce in the way she held her daughter, a protective strength that reminded him of a she-wolf guarding her cub. "Where are you headed?" he asked, stirring the pot. Mary looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "North," she said simply. "My aunt lives in Dallas. She said in her last letter that if I ever needed help, but that was before Grace was born. I don't know if she'll take us both in, but I got to try. Ain't nowhere else to go. Dallas is still 2 days hard ride from here," Sam said quietly, "maybe 3 on foot, especially carrying a baby." Mary's face crumpled. "I know," she whispered. "I've been trying so hard, but she keeps getting weaker, and I can't lose her. She's all I got left in this world." Sam looked at this young woman, barely more than a girl herself, who had walked across the Texas wilderness with nothing but determination and love for her child, keeping her going. In her, he saw something he'd thought he'd lost during the war. Pure, uncomplicated goodness fighting against impossible odds. The baby stirred in Mary's arms, letting out a weak cry that sounded more like a kitten's mew than a human child. Mary lifted her dress with shaking hands, trying to nurse, but it was clear she had nothing left to give. "The stew's almost ready," Sam said gruffly, turning back to the fire to hide the emotion in his eyes. "You eat first, get some strength. Back then, we'll figure out what to do about the little one." "I can't pay you nothing," Mary said quickly. "I ain't got no money, no nothing to trade, but I can work. Once I get my strength back, I can cook, clean, mend clothes." "Didn't ask for payment," Sam replied. Ladling the hot stew into his only bowl, he handed it to her along with his spoon. "Eat." Mary took the bowl with trembling hands, her eyes never leaving his face. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you helping us? You don't even know us." Sam was quiet for a long moment, watching the flames dance in the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost lost in the crackling of the burning wood. "Had a daughter once," he said simply. "She'd be about your age now, if she'd lived." Sometimes a man gets a chance to do right by someone else's child, when he couldn't do right by his own. Chapter 2. The weight of the past. Mary ate the stew slowly, savoring each spoonful while trying to make it last. Sam could see her fighting the urge to wolf it down, her body's desperate need for nourishment warring with the knowledge that eating too quickly after days of starvation could make her sick. Smart girl, he thought. She'd learned hard lessons about survival. While she ate, Sam rummaged through his supplies, pulling out a small tin of condensed milk he'd been saving for coffee. It wasn't much, but mixed with some water and warmed by the fire, it might give the baby the strength she needed to make it through the night. "Tell me about your daughter," Mary said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. Sam's hands stilled on the milk tin. It had been 3 years since anyone had asked him about Emma. 3 years since he'd spoken her name aloud. The words felt rusty in his throat. "Emma Catherine Carter," he said finally, his voice barely audible over the fire's crackling. "Born in 1854, died in 1863. She was 9 years old." Mary stopped eating her spoon halfway to her mouth. "The war fever," Sam replied, his weathered hands working to open the tin. "I was with Sherman's army, somewhere in Georgia, when the letter came. My wife wrote that Emma had taken sick, but by the time I got the news, she'd been in the ground for 2 weeks. He paused, his jaw working. "Margaret, that was my wife. She said Emma kept asking for her papa, wanted to know when I was coming home." The baby stirred in Mary's arms, and Sam focused on mixing the milk with water in his spare cup, grateful for something to do with his hands. "Margaret blamed me for leaving, said if I'd stayed on the farm instead of joining up, maybe I could have gotten Emma to a doctor in time. Maybe she was right." "Where's your wife now?" Mary asked gently. "Remarried," Sam said, testing the temperature of the milk mixture against his wrist. "A banker from Kansas City, nice man, from what I heard, stable, the kind of man who comes home every night for supper." He looked up at Mary, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Can't say I blame her. After Emma died, there wasn't much left to hold us together except grief, and that's a poor foundation for a marriage." Mary finished the stew and set the bowl aside, then reached for the cup of warm milk. "You blame yourself," she said softly. "It wasn't a question." "Every day," Sam admitted, "I tell myself I was fighting for something important, that preserving the Union mattered, but when I see a child," he gestured toward baby Grace, who was trying weakly to take the milk from her mother's finger, "I wonder if any cause is worth missing your daughter's whole life." Mary dipped her finger in the milk and let Grace suck on it, drop by precious drop. The baby's eyes opened briefly, focusing on nothing, but she seemed to have a little more strength. "My daddy was a soldier too," Mary said quietly. "Mexican War, then the Confederate Army. He came home from that war different than when he left. Mama said he used to laugh all the time before he went away, but after, he was quiet, drank too much, had nightmares." She paused, continuing to feed Grace tiny amounts of milk. "He died when I was 16. Took a job breaking horses for a rancher outside San Antonio, and one of them threw him, broke his neck." Her voice was steady, but Sam could see the pain in her eyes. "Mama said maybe it was a mercy. Said the war had killed the man she married years before. His body finally gave up." Sam understood. He'd seen too many men come back from the war carrying invisible wounds that never healed, ghosts that followed them from battlefield to battlefield, until they found their way to the bottom of a bottle or the barrel of a gun. "What happened to your mama?" he asked. Mary's face hardened. "Cholera, 2 years ago. Left me alone with nothing but debts, and a man named Jake Morrison who thought a girl with no family was fair game." She looked down at Grace, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Grace's daddy." Sam felt a familiar anger rise in his chest, the same rage that had carried him through battles from Antietam to Atlanta. Men who preyed on the vulnerable, who used their strength to take what didn't belong. To them, they were the enemy, whether they wore gray uniforms or business suits. "He forced you?" Sam asked quietly. Mary shook her head. "No, not exactly. He was kind at first, after Mama died. Brought food, helped with the debts, made me feel like maybe I wasn't alone in the world. Said he loved me, wanted to marry me." Her voice turned bitter. "Until I told him about the baby. Then suddenly, he had a wife back east he'd forgotten to mention, and business that would take him away from San Antonio for a long while, but he kept coming around. Every few weeks," Mary said, her arms tightening protectively around Grace, "said the baby might not even be his, that I was probably carrying on with other men, but he'd bring money sometimes, and I was desperate. Then last week, he showed up drunk and angry, said his wife had found out about me, said I needed to disappear, that if I didn't leave town, he'd make sure I regretted it." Sam studied Mary's face in the firelight, seeing the fear she was trying to hide. "What kind of man is this Morrison? Rich," she said simply. "Owns half the businesses in San Antonio. Got the sheriff in his pocket. When Jake Morrison wants something done, it gets done, no questions asked." Sam nodded grimly. He'd known men like Morrison, men who thought money and influence put them above the law, above decency. During the war, he'd served under officers who believed their rank gave them the right to take whatever they wanted from the civilians they were supposed to protect. Grace had managed to take nearly half the milk, and her breathing seemed a little stronger. Mary looked exhausted but relieved, some of the desperate tension leaving her shoulders for the first time since she'd appeared at Sam's campfire. "You got any other family?" Sam asked. "Besides this aunt in Dallas?" "No," Mary said quietly. "Mama was an only child, and Daddy's people were all killed in the war or scattered afterward. Aunt Catherine, that's my mama's cousin, really is all that's left. But I ain't seen her since I was little, and like I said, I don't know if she want to take in a girl with a baby and no husband." Sam was quiet for a long moment, watching the fire burn down to glowing coals. He thought about Emma, about the daughter he'd never gotten to protect, never gotten to see grow up. He thought about his empty life, riding from job to job, with nothing but his horse and his ghosts for company. "I'm heading north anyway," he said finally. "Got a contract to deliver some horses to a ranch outside Fort Worth. Dallas ain't much farther than that." Mary looked up at him, hope flickering in her tired eyes. I mean you and the baby can ride with me?" Sam said. "Got enough supplies for a few more days, and Belle's strong enough to carry all of us if we take it slow." Tears spilled down Mary's cheeks. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Sam replied, banking the fire for the night. "We got a long road ahead, and Morrison might not be content to let you just disappear. Men like him don't like loose ends." As if summoned by his words, the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the prairie, still distant but unmistakably heading their way. Sam's hand moved to his gun as he counted the horses, at least 3, maybe 4, riding hard in the darkness. "Mary," he said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of his military years, "take the baby and get behind those rocks over there. Don't make a sound, no matter what happens." The hoofbeats were getting closer, and Sam could see the faint glow of torches in the distance. Mary clutched Grace to her chest, her face pale with terror. "It's him," she whispered. "It's Jake. He found us." Chapter 3. The Reckoning comes. Sam quickly kicked dirt over the fire, plunging the campsite into darkness except for the faint starlight filtering through the clouds. The hoofbeats were close now, maybe a quarter mile away, and he could hear the jingle of spurs and the creak of leather saddles. "How many men does Morrison usually travel with?" Sam whispered as Mary crouched behind the cluster of limestone rocks, with Grace pressed against her chest. 3, sometimes 4, she replied, her voice barely audible. "His foreman, Pete Kowalski, and whatever drifters he's paying for gun work." Sam checked his Colt .45, ensuring all 6 chambers were loaded, then pulled his Winchester rifle from its scabbard on Belle's saddle. The horse was nervous, sensing the tension, but she stood quietly, a good cavalry mount trained not to bolt at the first sign of trouble. The riders slowed as they approached, their torches casting dancing shadows across the mesquite brush. Sam could hear voices now, low and urgent. "Trail goes cold here, Mr. Morrison," a gravelly voice called out, "but there's been a fire recently, can smell the smoke." "She's here somewhere," came another voice, smoother and more educated. "Jake Morrison," Sam guessed. "Or she was at. Little whore thinks she can run from me, but nobody makes a fool of Jake Morrison and gets away with it." Sam felt his jaw clench. He'd heard that tone before. During the war, the casual arrogance of men who believed other people existed solely for their convenience and pleasure. The riders spread out, circling the area where Sam's fire had been. In the torchlight, he could make out for men. Morrison himself, a well-dressed man in his 40s, riding a fine bay horse. Kowalski, a thick-set man with a grizzled beard, and 2 younger men who had the hard, watchful look of hired guns. "Look around," Morrison ordered. "She can't have gone far on foot, especially carrying that bastard child." One of the younger men dismounted and began examining the ground with his torch held low. "Fresh horse tracks here, Mr. Morrison, and boot prints. Man's boots? Size. Looks about right for someone Mary's been traveling with." Morrison's voice turned sharp with interest. "Someone's helping her. Well, that changes things, doesn't it, boys?" Sam remained perfectly still in the shadows, his rifle trained on Morrison. In the cavalry he'd learned patience, how to wait for exactly the right moment to strike. But as he watched the men spread out, searching for signs of Mary and Grace, he felt the familiar cold rage building in his chest. "Find them," Morrison ordered. "I don't care what it takes. That girl knows too much about my business dealings, and I won't have her flapping her mouth to the law in Dallas." So it wasn't just about a discarded mistress and an unwanted child, Sam realized. Mary had seen or heard something that made her dangerous to Morrison's interests, that explained the urgency, the willingness to chase her across the Texas wilderness with armed men. "Mr. Morrison," Kowalski called out, holding his torch near Belle's hoofprints. "These tracks are fresh, maybe an hour old. They're heading north toward the old cattle trail." "Then we follow," Morrison said. "Pete, you and Jake take the left flank. Tommy, you're with me. We'll run them down before dawn." As the men prepared to mount up and continue the chase, Sam made his decision. He couldn't let them ride away, couldn't let them hunt Mary and Grace across the prairie like animals. Emma's face flashed in his mind, his daughter's innocent smile, her trust that her papa would always protect her from the monsters in the world. He'd failed Emma. He wouldn't fail another child. "That's far enough, gentlemen," Sam called out, stepping into the torchlight with his rifle raised. "I suggest you turn around and ride back where you came from." The 4 men spun toward his voice, hands reaching for their weapons. Morrison's face was lean and sharp-featured, with cold eyes and the kind of mustache that belonged in a gentleman's club rather than on the Texas prairie. Well, Morrison said, his voice smooth as silk. "The mysterious protector reveals himself. You must be the fool who thinks he can help that little whore escape her obligations." "I don't know anything about obligations," Sam replied, his rifle steady on Morrison's chest. "But I know a man hunting a woman and baby across the wilderness, and that's something I can't abide." Kowalski started to reach for his gun, but Sam's voice cut through the night like a whipped crack. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, friend. I've got 43 confirmed kills from the war, and I'm feeling nostalgic tonight." The foreman's hand froze halfway to his holster. In the torchlight, Sam could see the uncertainty in the men's faces. They'd been expecting to intimidate a frightened girl, not face down a battle-hardened veteran with a rifle. "You don't understand the situation," Morrison said, trying to regain control. "That woman stole money from me, and she's carrying a child that might be mine. I have every right to." "You have the right to shut your mouth and ride away," Sam interrupted. "Before I decide you've lived long enough." Morrison's face flushed with anger. "Do you know who I am? I own half of San Antonio. I can have you hunted down like a dog." "Maybe," Sam agreed, "but you won't be around to see it." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, for men against one, but Sam had the advantage of position and experience. More importantly, he had something they didn't, the absolute certainty that he was fighting for something that mattered. Then Grace cried out from behind the rocks, a weak but unmistakable sound that cut through the tension like a knife. Morrison's eyes lit up with triumph. There, he pointed toward the rocks. "Pete, Tommy, go get them." As the 2 men spurred their horses toward Mary's hiding place, Sam made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his days. He shot Pete Kowalski first, the bullet taking the foreman's center mass and toppling him from his saddle. The second shot caught Tommy in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. The remaining gunman Jake went for his pistol, but Sam was faster, his third shot punching through the man's chest before his weapon cleared leather. In less than 10 seconds, 3 men were down, and Jake Morrison sat alone on his horse, staring at Sam with a mixture of rage and fear. "Your turn," Sam said quietly. "Draw or ride away, but if you ride away, you don't come back. You don't hunt that girl. You don't send other men after her. You forget she ever existed." Morrison's hand hovered over his gun, his face twisted with fury. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled. "I'll see you hang for this." "Maybe," Sam said, "but not tonight." Morrison looked at the bodies of his men, at Sam's unwavering rifle, at the reality that his money and influence meant nothing out here in the darkness. With a curse, he jerked his horse's reins and spurred away into the night, leaving his dead men behind. Sam waited until the hoofbeats faded completely before lowering his rifle. Mary emerged from behind the rocks, her face pale but determined, Grace clutched protectively in her arms. "Is it over?" she whispered. Sam looked at the 3 bodies scattered around their campsite, at the blood soaking into the Texas earth. "For now," he said grimly, "but Morrison won't give up easily. We need to move, and we need to move fast." Chapter 4. Promise of Dawn. By the time the eastern sky began to show the first pale hints of dawn, Sam and Mary had been riding hard for 3 hours. Grace slept fitfully in her mother's arms, wrapped in Sam's spare blanket, and secured to Mary's chest with strips torn from her petticoat. Belle, despite carrying double weight, maintained a steady pace across the rolling prairie. Her cavalry training serving them well, Sam had taken them off the main trail, following cattle paths and creek beds that would make them harder to track. Morrison would be back, probably with more men, and Sam had no illusions about their chances if they were caught in the open. Their only hope was to reach Fort Worth before Morrison could organize a proper pursuit. How much farther? Mary asked, her voice strained from exhaustion and the constant worry about Grace, who seemed to be growing weaker despite the milk she'd managed to take. Fort Worth's still a good day's ride, Sam replied, scanning the horizon for signs of pursuit. But there's a trading post about 10 miles ahead, McMurphy's station. We can rest there, get some supplies, maybe find someone heading to Dallas who'd take you the rest of the way. Mary was quiet for a moment, adjusting Grace in her arms. You're not coming with us? Sam had been dreading this conversation. The truth was, after what had happened at the campsite, he was a wanted man. Morrison might be a bastard, but he was a rich bastard with connections, and 3 men were dead by Sam's hand. No matter how justified the killings might have been, no matter that he'd been protecting a woman and child, the law would see it differently. Can't, he said simply. Morrison's got enough pull to put a bounty on my head from here to Louisiana. Best thing I can do for you and Grace is put some distance between us before he catches up. But where will you go? Mary's voice was small. Frightened at the prospect of losing the one person who'd shown her kindness, Sam had been asking himself the same question. Mexico, maybe, or the territories where federal law was still more suggestion than reality. Somewhere he could disappear. Start over with a new name and a clean slate. North, I think, he lied. Canada, maybe. Heard they're looking for experienced ranchers up there. They rode in silence for another hour, the sun climbing higher and painting the Texas landscape in shades of gold and red. Despite everything, the violence, the exhaustion, the uncertainty ahead, there was something peaceful about this moment. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, unmarked by fences or roads, and for a brief time, Sam could almost forget the weight of his past mistakes. McMurphy's station appeared on the horizon like a mirage, a cluster of adobe buildings, surrounding a well, with corrals, 4 horses, and a general store that served travelers on the cattle trails. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main building, and Sam could see several horses tied to the hitching posts. Stay close, he warned Mary as they approached, and let me do the talking. Far as anyone knows, you're my wife, and Grace is our daughter. We're heading to Dallas to visit your sister. Mary nodded, though Sam could see the flush in her cheeks at the deception. Under different circumstances, he might have found her embarrassment endearing, but there was no time for such thoughts now. Patrick McMurphy himself came out to greet them, a barrel-chested Irishman with graying hair and arms like tree trunks. He'd been running the trading post for 15 years, and Sam had stopped there before, on cattle drives. Sam Carter, McMurphy boomed, his accent still thick with the old country. Been a year or more since you've graced us with your presence. And who's this lovely lady? My wife Mary, Sam said, helping her down from Belle, and our daughter Grace. We're heading to Dallas, but the little one's been poorly. Thought we might rest here for a spell. McMurphy's wife, a kindly woman named Bridget, appeared at his elbow and immediately took charge of Mary and Grace. Poor dears, she clucked, ushering them toward the main building. You look exhausted, both of you. Come inside. We'll get you fed and rested proper. While the women fussed over Grace, Sam found himself alone with McMurphy, who was eyeing him with the shrewd gaze of a man who'd seen too much of the frontier to be easily fooled. Trouble following you, Sam? The Irishman asked quietly. Maybe, Sam admitted. Nothing that should touch you or yours. But if anyone comes asking about a man traveling with a woman and baby, we ain't seen nobody fitting that description, McMurphy said firmly. Been quiet as a grave here for days. Sam felt a surge of gratitude for the unspoken code of the frontier, the understanding that sometimes a man needed help. No questions asked. I'm obliged. There's a freight wagon heading to Dallas tomorrow morning, McMurphy continued. Driver's name is Jonas Wickham, solid man with a wife and kids of his own. He'd take you, Mary, and the baby for a fair price. And he's got enough firepower to discourage any foolishness along the way. It was the answer to Sam's prayers, but it also meant saying goodbye. He'd known Mary for less than 12 hours, but in that time, she'd become something he hadn't expected. Hope. Hope that he could still do right by someone, that his scarred hands could protect instead of destroy. Inside the trading post, Mary was sitting by the fire with Grace, who was taking small sips of warm broth from a spoon. The baby's color looked better, and her eyes were more alert than they'd been since Sam first saw her. She's going to be fine, Bridget announced with the confidence of a woman who'd raised 6 children of her own. Just needed some proper nourishment and rest, though I'd recommend finding a wet nurse in Dallas if you can afford it. The little one needs more than milk and broth. Mary looked up as Sam approached, and he saw the question in her eyes. He knelt beside her chair, speaking quietly so the McMurphys wouldn't overhear. "There's a wagon going to Dallas tomorrow," he said. "Good man, driving it, and he'll see you safe to your aunt's house." Mary's face fell. "And you?" "I'll be moving on. It's better this way, safer for you and Grace." Mary was quiet for a long moment, stroking Grace's thin hair with gentle fingers. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but sad. "I don't even know how to begin thanking you," she said. "You saved our lives, and you don't even know us." "I know enough," Sam replied. "I know you walked across Texas with nothing but love for your daughter to keep you going. I know you're brave and strong, and you'll give Grace a good life, whatever it takes." Tears sparkled in Mary's eyes. "What if my aunt won't take us in?" "What if she will?" Sam said, with more confidence than he felt. "And if she doesn't, Wickham's a good man. He'll help you find somewhere safe." That evening, as the sun set over the Texas prairie, Sam sat outside the trading post watching Mary feed Grace by the light of the oil lamps. The baby was definitely stronger, taking the milk eagerly and even managing a few moments of alertness before falling back to sleep. Had arrived an hour before sunset, a weathered man in his 50s, with kind eyes and calloused hands. He'd agreed to take Mary and Grace to Dallas for $5, and Sam had paid the fare without hesitation, along with enough extra money to keep them fed and housed until Mary could find work. "You're a good man, Sam Carter," Wickham had said, quietly. "Whatever trouble's following you, I hope you find your way clear of it." As the stars came out, Mary joined Sam on the porch, Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, coyotes calling in the distance, the rustle of wind through the mesquite, the occasional stamp and snort of horses in the corral. "I've been thinking about names," Mary said suddenly, names for Grace's middle name. "She ain't got one yet. When she was born, I was so worried about just keeping her alive. I never got around to picking a middle name." Mary looked at Sam, her eyes reflecting the lamplight. "From the window, I was thinking ... Grace Samuel, if that's all right with you." Sam felt something tight in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced since Emma's death. "I'd be honored," he said quietly. "She know," Mary continued. "When she's old enough to understand, I'll tell her about the man who saved us both. About how her papa, her real papa, was a hero." Sam wanted to protest, to tell her he was no hero, just a broken-down ex-soldier, trying to make amends for a lifetime of mistakes. But looking at Grace's peaceful face, at Mary's determined expression, he realized it didn't matter what he thought of himself. What mattered was that this child would grow up knowing that someone had cared enough to risk everything for her safety. In the morning, Sam helped load Mary's few possessions into Wickham's wagon. Grace was alert and hungry, crying with the healthy indignation of a baby who wanted her breakfast immediately. Mary had managed to produce enough milk for a proper feeding, and the color in both their faces was dramatically improved. "You take care of yourself," Sam said, kissing Mary's forehead gently, "and you take care of that little girl." "I will," Mary promised. "And Sam, if you ever change your mind about Canada, if you ever want to know how we're doing, we'll be in Dallas." Sam nodded, though they both knew he couldn't make that promise. As Wickham's wagon rolled away toward the sunrise, Sam stood watching until it disappeared over the horizon. Then he saddled Belle, paid McMurphy for his night's lodging, and rode south toward Mexico and whatever future awaited him there.